Hello, hopefully you can hear me. Why I'm wearing the same clothes as yesterday, because I'm not here today for the morning, but we have so much to do today, it's not even funny, so I'm going to record this. Learning is important, not just filling in notes. Filling in notes is only to remind us of what we have learned. We have a test Friday, so let's go. We're picking up with the Civil War after Gettysburg. We covered Gettysburg yesterday. You can review that. You should have the notes for that. We left off most classes. We talked about the Gettysburg Address, depending on what period you're in. So this is the Gettysburg Address. I'll get out of your way so you can read it. You can pause and read it if you want. But basically, it starts off 7 years ago. Our fathers set forth on this continent, a new nation conceived of liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So the Gettysburg Address. Basically, it was a famous speech by Abraham Lincoln 7 years ago, explained why he believed the war was worth fighting and why the United States as a country was worth saving. It was kind of a pep talk to the country. A lot of people in the North were saying, why are you even bothered? Just let the South go. And this is saying, look, we owe it to those people who died here at Gettysburg. We owe it to our founding fathers to keep going with this country where all men are created equal. Most of you saw these pictures yesterday, but in case you did not, the Gettysburg Address, there is Lincoln. Three known photos taken that day. There's one. You probably can't see that there, but I'll put the slideshow up as well so you can see it. And then finally, the third one was a selfie he took with a friend of his. That happens after Gettysburg. After the Gettysburg Address, the war drags on a little bit. Lincoln promotes General Ulysses S. Grant. This is the next thing. We're going to go 1863, 64 into 1865. So we're going to have Lincoln promotes General Ulysses S. Grant, Atlanta in the March to the Sea, Lincoln reelected, Petersburg, Richmond, and Appomattox Courthouse. This is Lincoln promotes General Ulysses S. Grant. So after Gettysburg, you remember there's a war going on. There's fighting going on out here in the West, trying to capture the Mississippi River, where Ulysses S. Grant was in charge. He was being successful. Here in the East, we're successful at Gettysburg, but still trying to capture Richmond, Virginia here. Haven't been able to do that. So Lincoln is going to bring Ulysses S. Grant over to the East. He's going to put him in charge of the entire Union Army and bring him to the East here and put him in charge. So Grant will be in charge of the entire Union Army, but he himself personally comes to the East. Out West, he leaves a person named William T. Sherman. He is going to be in charge of the army out West. This is after 1862. Remember, they're trying to capture Richmond in the East, Mississippi in the West. 1863, after Gettysburg, this is kind of where we stand. In the East, we now have, after Vicksburg and Shiloh, after Vicksburg, the Union controls the Mississippi River, which divides the Confederacy in two. This is part of that Anaconda Plan. The Union has captured a little bit of land along the coast, but not that much. And up here, still no closer to Richmond, Virginia, than they were at the beginning of the war. So Ulysses S. Grant comes over here, and he is going to be put in charge trying to capture Richmond. This is Ulysses S. Grant, very aggressive general. He is replaced by William T. Sherman, William Tecumseh Sherman, named after Tecumseh, who we talked about in the War of 1812. Going on, because I don't want to keep this quick. So after Gettysburg, Ulysses S. Grant, promoted to commander of the entire Union Army. He takes over leadership in the East, very aggressive. He believes in something called total war. Total war means basically you don't just fight on the battlefield, you destroy everything you can to weaken the enemy. That means, in this case, you burn plantations, you pull up railroad lines, you destroy railroad lines, bridges, towns, everything. You destroy everything just to weaken the enemy. William T. Sherman takes over for him. He also believes in total war, and he is going to begin something called the March to the Sea. Basically, what he's going to do is take the army from the West. After they've captured the Mississippi River, they're going to head sort of to the southeast, cutting the South into again, and this is called the March to the Sea, basically destroying everything along the way. He will be hated in the South for this. This is William T. Sherman on his horse. this is them. This is where their sort of their march to the sea goes. By this point, there's really not much opposition. Most of the Confederate army that was in the West has been destroyed. There's just a smaller version of the army for the Confederates left. They're trying to defend, not doing much good. Most of the army in the East has been destroyed for the Confederates thanks to that mastermind Robert E. Lee and Pickett's charge. So there's not much defense here. They're able to march through the South pretty quickly, destroying almost everything along the way. Here you can see some of the cities that were in ruins after William T. Sherman and his men marched through. I believe this is Atlanta, Georgia, pretty much destroyed. So they lead the march to the sea. Meanwhile, up here trying to capture Richmond, Virginia, is Ulysses S. Grant and his men. And they are going to, well, we'll give you a pause. You can pause here and fill in the notes, or I will put it on the slideshow so you can see it. But Lincoln placed in charge of the entire Union Army, this says. Grant personally, underlined, took command of the Union forces in the East. Grant was very aggressive, believed in total war, means destroying anything, everything that might help the enemy. William T. Sherman takes his place. Atlanta and the March to the Sea, Union troops led by William T. Sherman moved from the west to capture and burn Atlanta, Georgia. Sherman and his army then continued their march to the sea, destroying almost everything in the way. For example, towns, farms, crops, railroads, telegraph lines, etc., etc. Example of total war. Meanwhile, there's an election going on. Now, because the Union has been doing better here lately, after Gettysburg, the fortunes of the Union get much better. Lincoln's popularity starts to increase. Lincoln is running for re-election here. And the only thing, they do make a change. If you remember, little trivia, who was the vice president for Lincoln's first term? Hannibal Hamlin. Yes, I don't expect you to know that. His second term, he is going to replace Hannibal Hamlin with a man named Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson was actually a member of the other party, a Democrat party. He was the Democratic Party, and he was from the South. But he was loyal to the Union. He was not a traitor. He stayed loyal to the Union. And Lincoln kind of rewards him by making him vice president, partially to show the South and the whole country that he is willing to work with anyone. Southerners, Democrats, he is doing whatever it takes to put the country back together again and reunite the country. And plus, who cares about vice presidents? It's not like they ever become president. Meanwhile, opposition. He is running against his good old friend, George McClellan, the general that he fired, running against George McClellan. McClellan is a Democrat who wants to end the war, make peace with the South, either let them have their own country or let them keep their slaves, just make peace. Lincoln would call him a copperhead, correct. This is supposed to be McClellan. This is Lincoln. This is Jefferson Davis, the Confederate president. They are literally tearing the country apart. McClellan's going to stop them if he is elected. So, election of 1864, Lincoln seeking re-election. His opponent is General George McClellan. McClellan would be called a copperhead. He promises peace. The Confederate states do not vote in this election. And spoiler, Lincoln ends up winning. Thanks to the Union victories, people are now happy with Lincoln again. Lincoln gets reelected. Vote all of these red states are Lincoln. The states down here, their Confederate states do not participate in the election. McClellan won some of those. He won Kentucky, New Jersey, and Delaware, it looks like. So he won a few states, but Lincoln wins in a landslide overall. So to fill in the notes, Lincoln is reelected, defeated George McClellan to be reelected as president. George McClellan. I don't think you can see that, but you've probably seen it enough places that you can write his name. There you go. All right. The coloring is not great on the video. I apologize. We're still trying to capture Richmond, Virginia here. And that's the only thing really that's left where the Confederate government is. Now, the one thing is standing in the way. The Union troops are down here. There's this town called Petersburg where most of the Confederates have most of their army centered here in Petersburg. The Union is trying to get to Richmond up here, but they need to get by Petersburg. There's going to be a siege of Petersburg that goes on for weeks and weeks. Siege, by the way, is a military operation in which enemy forces surround a town or building, cutting off essential supplies, trying to force surrender. Basically, it is like a blockade on land. So if you can see this, Petersburg, Richmond. I will read it to you, but it says Union troops captured Petersburg, which is a town in Virginia, after a 9+ month siege. S-E-I-G-E. A siege means to surround with troops like a blockade on land. Like a blockade on land, that's a siege. After capturing Petersburg, Union troops quickly moved on to capture Richmond. Confederate government had already left and set fire to Richmond on their way out of town. They burn everything, so the city becomes destroyed, even though the Union doesn't destroy it. Confederate troops are going to march southwest, hoping to unite with what's left of their Western Army. So what was left of the Western Army here for the Confederates, and what was left after the Union defeats them at Petersburg and captures Richmond, Robert E. Lee and his men start moving this way, hoping to reunite with what was left of these two very weakened armies. They're hoping to come together and unite to be strong enough to keep fighting. Lee and his men march for several days, like 3 or 4 days, without food, without supplies. They are supposed to meet up with a supply train, a Confederate supply train that is going to bring them, I look like a shadow here, but that is going to bring them food and supplies. After 3 or 4 days of marching without rest and without food or supplies, they receive word that the train that was supposed to be bringing them supplies has been captured by the Union. It's not going to arrive. At that point, Robert E. Lee realizes they're done. There's nothing they can do. He's going to have to surrender. So they look around. They happen to be in this little town called Appomattox Courthouse. Appomattox Courthouse is the name of the town, not the building. Appomattox Courthouse, little town out in the middle of nowhere. Message to General Grant saying, I would like to meet with you tomorrow. Looks for a place to meet. Finds this farmhouse, which belongs to a guy named Wilmer McLean. Wilmer McLean, interesting little historical fact. The Battle of Bull Run, Manassas, was fought on his farm. It destroyed his farm. A year later, second Bull Run battle, second Manassas battle, was fought on his farm as well. He decides he's going to sell the farm, move out to the country, get out of the way of the war. He ends up buying this farmhouse in Appomattox Courthouse. Soldiers can come and knock on his door, ask him if they can use his house as a meeting room, and this is where the surrender is going to take place. He liked to say that the war began in his backyard and ended in his living room or something like that. So they meet up in Appomattox Courthouse. It's not really a battle. It's just a surrender here, and they surrender. This is Robert E. Lee signing the surrender papers. Ulysses S. Grant is very generous with them, gives them food, gives them supplies, medical supplies, anything they need, lets them keep horses, and makes sure his own men are very quiet and respectful and not celebrating too much in the faces of the Confederates. Because was General Grant generous and respectful to the Confederates when they surrendered? First of all, he knew that now, once they surrender, they are all Americans again, and they have to get to work on reuniting the country. Secondly, he doesn't want to give them a reason to keep fighting. There have been rumors that maybe they're going to try to keep fighting a guerrilla warfare or something. He doesn't want that to happen. All right, to fill in the notes here, Appomattox Courthouse, after Union troops intercept the Confederate supply train, Robert E. Lee decides to surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. Note, this is a town. General Grant's troops are very respectful, generous, kind to the Confederates because, number one, they are now all Americans again, and two, he doesn't want the fighting to start again. Last thing you're going to fill in on the last page, this is just a summary of the battles of the war. This might be helpful for like a cheat sheet if you had to make one up for a test or something. I don't know if I can get it so you can see it well, but I will put it on the website as well. You can pause there and get most of it. I would suggest that you actually read it and don't just fill in the blanks because it's going to be helpful to you to know the information, not just to have the notes filled in. This is zoomed in a little bit more so you can see it. This might be more helpful. Pause and get that if you can. And then the next one, there's the bottom of the page. There's the whole thing. Last thing, the which side is which. There's two more things to fill in here. The generals, if you did not fill in the generals, I think most of you did, but I will put them on here. Fill in the generals. General George McClellan for the Union, McClellan, Grant, and Sherman. For the Confederates, Jackson and Robert E. Lee. For the victories, just a summary of the victories. For the Union, you have Antietam, Shiloh, Vicksburg. Shiloh is not, I won't ask you about that probably, but Vicksburg, Gettysburg, and the March to the Sea. For the Confederates, we had the Appomattox Courthouse. For the Confederacy, Fort Sumter, Manassas, Bull Run. That's about it. Why the Union won? You need to know the Union wins the war. Very important to know that the North, the United States, the Union, they were the winners, not the Confederacy, not France, not England, not Pearl Harbor, not anyone else. The Union wins the war. Why did they win? They had more population, more money, more industry, more railroads. They had a successful plan. The blockade and the lack of Southern industry led to shortages of everything in the South. The strategies, the blockade, sieges, total war, Anaconda plan, those worked out. And the Confederate losses at Gettysburg were devastating to them, to the Confederates. Finally, problems with the Confederate government. They were having struggles as a government. All right, that's all you need. There's going to be some questions to answer in Schoology for you as well. Watch the other videos as well. That is all. Thank you.